the world has always been fascinated by the mystique of ancient Egypt. Its historical sites are among the go-to destinations for archaeological expeditions. Several are listed as part of the world's heritage, and crowds of tourists flock to visit them every year. In pop culture, using an Egyptian theme is a safe bet when it comes to attracting a large global audience. As a result, the legacy of this Egyptian empire is continuously studied and celebrated by cultural producers from all corners of the world. From the outsider perspective, this seems positive. However, cultural representation is a delicate matter, and, if not handled carefully, even good intentions can backfire. In this video, we will analyze how that happens by taking a closer look at the backlash against Netflix's Cleopatra documentary and a Kemet-themed exhibition hosted by the Leiden National Museum of Antiques in the Netherlands. In both cases, the teams behind these projects wanted to bring in new perspectives on ancient history to interest and educate their audience. Jada Pinkett Smith, an executive producer behind the Cleopatra documentary, aimed to highlight the sharp intellect and cultural heritage of the iconic ruler, which, in her view, was overlooked in the existing portrayals of Cleopatra produced by Hollywood over the years. The trailer positions the queen as the world's most famous, powerful, and misunderstood woman. Just how much became obvious even before the documentary was released. When its YouTube trailer came out, it soon amassed over 250,000 dislikes, and Netflix decided to close the comment section due to negative comments piling up. It also was crowned as the worst-rated show ever on Rotten Tomatoes, described as a surface-level docudrama that slips into Mills and Boone territory. Tina Garavi, the director of Cleopatra, received online abuse, including accusations of blackwashing and falsifying history. In response to the criticism, Garavi argued that she did her homework. While researching the origin of the ancient queen, she found that Cleopatra was 8 generations away from the ancestors of the Ptolemies, and her Greek-Macedonian family intermarried with the Seleucid dynasty in Western Asia. In other words, this means that Cleopatra was Egyptian with diverse origins, and the chance of her being completely white is inconceivable. Following this logic, Garavi decided to cast Adele James, a British actress of black and white heritage, in the lead role. Sadly, Tina Garavi's attempt to give current and future generations a more diverse image of the ancient history fell flat. Her explanation fell on deaf ears, and, worse still, the actress also got cancelled on social media, receiving a barrage of racist comments. Most of the backlash came from the Egyptians, who claimed that the documentary falsified their history. One of the critics, Egyptian lawyer Mahmoud al-Semari, even sued Netflix for forgery and asked the authorities to shut down the streaming service in Egypt, arguing that it does not conform to Islamic and Egyptian societal values. Egyptian Antiquities Ministry added fuel to the fire with an official statement that described Cleopatra as a woman with a white skin and Hellenistic characteristics, using bas-reliefs and statues of Queen Cleopatra as proofs. Unfortunately, the experts whose views appeared in the trailer did not help matters, but rather gave critics more ammunition. In the official trailer, Islam Issa, a scholar and writer of British and Egyptian origin, literally stated he imagined Cleopatra to have curly hair like him and a similar skin color. Shelley Haley, a retired professor of classics and Africana studies, repeated a claim made by her grandmother, who said, "I don't care what they teach you at school, Cleopatra was black." Although in the documentary Haley confirmed that Cleopatra's heritage remains unknown to this day, its trailer featured her repeating the comment based on a layperson's view. For many, it signaled that the representation in the film was historically inaccurate, and the opinions of the experts were questionable at best. Our next case of a representation gone wrong is an exhibition called Kemet, Egypt in Hip-Hop, Jazz, Soul and Funk, hosted by the Leiden National Museum of Antiquities. The event organizers also wanted to create a unique angle here, but suffered a similar fate. Their aim was to analyze how the cultures of ancient Egypt and Nubia continue to impact modern-day music. The exhibition featured research about Nubia, an ancient empire that lied between Aswan in Egypt and Khartoum in today's Sudan, and ancient Egypt. This time, the issue lied with the material they used. The artists whose works were featured as part of the exhibition did not hail from Egypt. They were all African American, including the likes of Miles Davis, Nas, Sun Ra, Beyoncé, and Rihanna. This choice led to fierce criticism, because some of the artists are dark-skinned, and their work was featured to represent ancient Egyptians. The head of foreign missions of the Egyptian Antiquities Service accused the museum of falsifying history with Afrocentric storytelling. On top of that, The Egyptian authorities were so offended by this representation that they barred the museum's archaeologists from carrying out excavations in the country. So, what infuriated the critics so much? The first thing that raised people's eyebrows was the event's title, Kemet, which means black land. They assumed that the exhibition wanted to portray ancient Egyptians as people with a dark skin tone. The authors countered that by explaining that the word Kemet referred to the dark color of the soil of the Nile River Valley, not the appearance of its inhabitants. The main source of controversy, however, was David Court's statue titled I Am Hip Hop, inspired by the album of the African-American rapper Nas. The album cover features the musician wearing a mask of the King Tutankhamun. Egyptian antiquities expert Abd al-Rahim Rihan flagged the piece to the Egyptian authorities, accusing Nas of creating an unauthorized copy of the ancient relic. His protest led to a local newspaper, Egypt Independent, publishing an article with a headline, Dutch Museum Claims Tutankhamun Was Black. This led to accusations against the museum for promoting the Afrocentric theory, which states dark-skinned Africans were the ancient Egypt's true rulers. The museum defended the exhibition, explaining that it featured historical facts and analyzed how ancient Egypt was portrayed by black artists. He even acknowledged that music can be seen as a form of cultural appropriation. Yet, critics did not budge. So, what can we learn from both examples? On one hand, in both cases, creatives made some questionable choices. On the other hand, one can't help but wonder why the response was so extreme. Are there so many history buffs interested in ancient Egypt? Or is there also something else? As it happens with all controversies, there is more to the story. As mentioned before, institutions and creatives from the West have a problematic habit of casually claiming the ancient Egyptian culture as their own. Interestingly, there is a practical reason why. In 1961, when the U.S. answered Egypt's call for help with rescuing their ancient temples from flooding, the American government assisted with a view that the monuments in question were also part of the Western culture. Philip Coombs, a member of the Kennedy's administration that granted the aid, literally said, "These monuments are great historical roots of the Western civilization. We are doing our own future generations in this country a favor, insofar as we are helping to preserve their own historical roots." This is not a bilateral gift in any sense. You can also see this attitude in the cinematic representation of Egypt. Classic films about Cleopatra from Western productions all feature non-Egyptian actresses. In the version from 1934, the Queen is depicted by Claudette Colbert, and the 1963 film stars Elizabeth Taylor. Both were white American. The latest version of Cleopatra from the American production, due to be released in 2025, follows suit. Cleopatra is portrayed by Gal Gadot, an Ashkenazi Jewish actress who also co-produced the film. Gadot was also criticized for whitewashing and defended herself, saying the aim was to cast a Macedonian actress. But the casting team simply could not find the right fit. However, her official statement indicates that the criticism did not trouble her too much. She said, "You know, anybody can make this movie. Anybody can go ahead and do it. I'm very passionate that I'm going to do my own too." For objectivity, it could be argued that Netflix's docudrama and Leiden exhibition show a level of entitlement too. Not only the authors did not feature an Egyptian or Macedonian actress in the main role, but they took even more liberties with Cleopatra's visual representation. This resulted in creating an aesthetic that resembles ethnic diversity typical for the US rather than ancient Egypt. The Kemet exhibition references the history of Egypt and Nubia. However, it only includes African American musicians, not a single Egyptian. On the other hand, the backlash from the Egyptians in particular was not entirely driven by the alleged false historical representation. Creating authentic portrayals of history is a tall order when politics get involved. In Egypt, this problem arose when its current president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, came into office in 2013, bringing extreme and xenophobic nationalism with him. This led to a rise of populist rhetoric and ideas about Egyptian genes that make up a race-based Egyptian identity. The ongoing debate around the topic has not produced clear answers, due to its complexity, the number of players involved, and their competing agendas. Another reason for the backlash is a long-term effort to culturally differentiate Egypt from the rest of Central Africa. An example of this is the Egyptian Company for Acting and Cinema, founded by economist Talat Harb in 1925. Its official aim was to produce films promoting so-called Egyptian modernity. However, there was another, more obscure intention. Harb also aimed to counter the Eurocentric idea that Egyptians are close to barbarism. As a solution, the company created films showing a visual disassociation from Central African people. But let's not just focus on the negatives. Creating original, authentic representation can be done, and done well, if selfish agendas are set aside and the focus is placed on the right thing. An example of this is the documentary Secrets of the Saqqara Tomb, directed by James Tovell, which, funnily enough, was also produced by Netflix. In this film, a team of Egyptian archaeologists led by Mohammed Youssef discover a tomb from the 25th century BC in the Saqqara necropolis located near today's Cairo. Unlike the previous examples, Tovell's documentary was well received. The critics said that it demonstrated the emotional connection between the population living in the area today and the ancient civilization. All things considered, the history of ancient Egypt continues to be an area of contention among various parties and their competing agendas. In a way, this is also what keeps it alive. Islam Issa, a scholar featured in the infamous Cleopatra documentary, argued that the appeal of Cleopatra is that everyone can imagine her in their own way. Whereas that is true, it can also be counterproductive and even cause harm. To really appreciate this unique cultural heritage, creatives, experts, and the audiences alike should ask themselves where their focus truly lies: celebrating ancient history or selfish, personal politics?